The woman arrived early on her first day, long before the lobby filled with guests and noise. The building was quiet then, almost peaceful. Soft lights reflected off the polished floor, and the large piano near the center of the hall sat untouched, its black surface shining like still water. She noticed it right away, even though she tried not to stare. Her steps slowed for a moment, but she forced herself to keep walking. She had learned how to do that years ago, how to notice music without letting it pull her in. Music had once been everything to her. Now, it was something she kept locked away, like an old photo she didn't allow herself to look at. She had taken this job because it was safe, simple, no spotlight, no expectations, just steady hours and enough pay to get by. She wore plain clothes and tied her hair back, choosing not to stand out in any way. To anyone watching, she looked like just another worker starting over. The manager arrived soon after, loud and full of energy. His voice carried across the empty hall as he gave quick orders to the staff. He walked fast, talked faster, and barely looked at people when they spoke to him. When he reached her, he glanced at her paperwork and nodded once. "New hire," he said, not bothering to ask anything else. "Just follow instructions and don't get in the way." She nodded politely. She had heard worse before. As the morning went on, the place slowly came to life. Guests passed through, staff moved back and forth, and soft music played from hidden speakers. She focused on her tasks, doing everything carefully. She listened more than she spoke. When others complained about long hours or difficult guests, she stayed quiet. She had chosen this silence on purpose. But music has a way of finding people who try to escape it. As she wiped tables near the piano, she heard someone practicing in another room. The notes were uneven, rushed, full of small mistakes most people wouldn't notice. Her hands paused without her realizing it. She could almost feel where the fingers should have slowed, where the breath should have been taken. Her body remembered before her mind did. She shook her head gently and went back to work. Later that day, the manager stopped nearby while speaking with another staff member. He complained about the pianist scheduled for the weekend event, saying the performance had better be perfect. "This place is known for music," he said proudly. "One wrong note and people complain." Without thinking, she quietly said, "Sometimes feeling matters more than perfection." The words slipped out before she could stop them. The manager turned and looked at her for the first time, really looked. His eyes narrowed slightly, more amused than angry. "You play?" he asked, half laughing. She hesitated. Old habits told her to stay quiet. New habits told her honesty was safer than pretending. "I used to," she said. That was all it took. He laughed openly, shaking his head. "Used to," he repeated. Everyone used to play something. A few nearby workers smiled awkwardly. She felt heat rise to her face but said nothing more. She went back to cleaning, her movement steady even though her chest felt tight. From that moment on, the manager seemed to notice her more, but not in a good way. He corrected her sharply, even when she made no mistake. He spoke over her if she tried to explain something. Once, when she passed the piano again, he made a joke loud enough for others to hear. "Careful," he said. "We don't want secret musicians thinking this is their stage." Some people laughed. Some looked uncomfortable. She kept her eyes down. What they didn't know was that she had once stood on stages much larger than this room, that she had once practiced for hours until her fingers hurt, chasing a sound only she could hear. That music had taken her around the world and then taken something from her she never got back. She had walked away after that. Walked away because the joy was gone, replaced by pressure, loss, and silence that felt too loud. Starting over as someone unnoticed had been her choice. Over the next few days, she learned the rhythm of the place. She learned which guests liked quiet corners, which staff members needed help even if they didn't ask. People slowly began to trust her. They told her small things, complaints, jokes, worries. She listened. Music followed her everywhere. The piano was tuned regularly. Different players came and went. Some were good, some were not. Each time she passed, her fingers twitched slightly, like they wanted to remember. One evening, after most guests had left, she found herself alone in the hall for a brief moment. The lights were dimmed. The piano sat there, silent and waiting. She stood still, listening to the quiet. She did not touch it. Footsteps broke the moment. The manager appeared, checking his phone. "Don't just stand around," he said without looking up. "There's always something to do." She nodded and walked away. By the end of the week, she understood something clearly. The manager believed he knew everyone's value at a glance. He believed talent looked loud and confidence sounded like his own voice. Anyone quiet, anyone careful, was invisible to him. That suited her fine. She reminded herself why she was here. She was not here to prove anything, not here to be seen. This was just a job, just a place to rest. Still, every night as she left, the sound of piano music followed her out the door, echoing softly behind her, like a question she wasn't ready to answer yet. The second week began with a change in the air. Everyone could feel it, even before the manager announced anything. A major event was coming up, one that had been booked months in advance. Important guests, high expectations, and a lot of pressure. The kind of event the place liked to talk about afterward, if everything went well. The manager made sure everyone knew how serious it was. He reminded the staff again and again that mistakes would not be tolerated. His voice echoed through the halls as he gave instructions, pointing, correcting, complaining. Some people nodded quickly just to avoid his attention. Others tried harder than usual, afraid of doing something wrong. She listened quietly, standing near the back as always. Big events didn't scare her. She had lived through far worse pressure before. Still, she could sense trouble coming, the kind that builds slowly and then arrives all at once. The scheduled pianist arrived later that day for rehearsal. He was young, confident, and very aware of being watched. He played loudly, fast, and with more show than control. The manager stood nearby with his arms crossed, nodding as if every note was perfect. She passed through the hall with the cart, keeping her eyes forward, but her ears caught every sound. She noticed mistiming, rushed sections, places where the music should have breathed but didn't. Her face remained calm, but inside, something stirred. During a short break, the pianist complained openly about the piano being out of tune. The manager rushed to agree, blaming the maintenance team and promising it would be fixed immediately. It better be, the pianist said. I can't perform like this. She paused for just a moment, then spoke softly. The tuning is fine. It's the touch that needs adjusting. The words weren't meant to challenge anyone. They were simply true. Silence followed. The manager turned slowly, disbelief written across his face. What did you say? She realized too late that she had stepped out of her safe place. I'm sorry, she said calmly. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it was too late. The manager laughed again, louder this time. You hear that? He said to the pianist. We've got experts everywhere. A few people laughed nervously. The pianist smirked and went back to playing, even harder than before. The manager stepped closer to her. Let me make something clear, he said, lowering his voice. You're here to do your job, not give opinions on things you don't understand. She nodded, understood. From that moment on, the tension grew. The days leading up to the event were filled with small problems. Equipment arrived late. Schedules changed without warning. Staff members were pushed to their limits. The manager grew sharper, his patience thinner. He snapped at people for things beyond their control. Through it all, she remained steady. She helped where she could, stayed late when needed, and spoke kindly to co-workers who looked ready to break down. Some of them began to notice her calm, how nothing seemed to shake her. One evening, a co-worker stayed behind with her while they finished cleaning the hall. The piano sat covered, waiting for the big night. You don't act like this place scares you, the co-worker said quietly. Most of us are nervous, she smiled faintly. I've learned that fear doesn't help much. The co-worker hesitated, then asked, Did you really play before? She considered the question. The easy answer was to avoid it. Instead, she said, a long time ago. The co-worker nodded, as if that explained something. The night before the event, everything that could go wrong seemed to do just that. The pianist called in sick. No warning. No backup. Panic spread fast. The manager stormed through the hall, phone pressed to his ear, his face red with anger. He called agencies, contacts, anyone who might help. Every answer was the same. Too late. No one available. Staff gathered in small groups, whispering. Without music, the event would fail. Guests expected a performance. It was part of the promise. Someone joked quietly, trying to ease the tension. Maybe we should let her play. Laughter followed, thin and nervous. The manager overheard. He stopped and turned slowly, his eyes locking onto her. That's funny, he said. Really funny. She felt every eye on her. He stepped closer, voice sharp. Let me say this once so everyone understands. If she plays the piano tomorrow, I'll quit. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. No one laughed this time. She didn't react. Her face stayed calm. But inside, something cracked. Not anger, not pride. Something older, deeper. She remembered empty halls after concerts. the echo of applause that faded too quickly. She remembered promises broken, people who only cared when she performed perfectly. She remembered the day she closed the piano lid and walked away. This was not supposed to be part of her life anymore. The manager turned away, already dialing his phone again, confident in his control. The rest of the night passed in silence. People avoided her eyes, unsure what to say. She finished her work and left without a word. Outside, the air was cool. The city was quiet. She walked slowly, thinking she had come here to disappear, to rest, to be ordinary. But the piano had followed her again. At home, she sat alone, hands resting in her lap. They felt heavy, like they were holding memories instead of air. She pressed her fingers together, feeling the familiar shape of them, the strength she had tried to forget. She did not sleep much that night. By morning, a decision waited for her, even if she wasn't ready to face it yet. The morning of the event arrived quietly, almost too quietly. The building looked calm from the outside, but inside, tension sat in every corner. Staff moved faster than usual, voices low, faces tight. Everyone knew what had happened the night before. Everyone knew there was still no pianist. She arrived early again, as she always did. The piano stood uncovered now, freshly polished, waiting. It looked different in the morning light, less like an object and more like a memory. She kept her distance, focusing on her tasks, but her awareness never left it. The manager arrived late, already angry. He paced the hall with his phone in hand, making short calls, ending them just as quickly. Each one ended the same way. No solution. Unbelievable, he muttered loudly. People are useless. No one replied. As the hours passed, guests began to arrive, well-dressed, confident, expecting a perfect evening. They took their seats, glanced at the stage, and smiled politely. Soft recorded music played through the speakers, filling the space but not convincing anyone. A few staff members exchanged worried looks. Recorded music was not part of the plan. People would notice. She worked quietly, serving drinks, guiding guests, answering questions with calm respect. A few guests commented on how peaceful she seemed. She smiled and moved on. Inside, her thoughts were loud. She remembered her first piano lesson as a child, sitting on a bench that felt too big. She remembered the teacher's hands guiding hers, showing her how sound could feel alive. Those memories had never left her, no matter how hard she tried to bury them. A co-worker approached her near the back of the hall. He still hasn't found anyone, they whispered. She nodded. I know. There was a pause. You don't have to, the co-worker added carefully. No one expects you to. She appreciated that more than the words could say. The event was scheduled to begin in less than an hour. The manager gathered the staff, his face forced into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We'll delay the performance section, he said. Most people won't notice, but they would. As guests settled in, murmurs spread. People checked programs, glanced at watches, leaned toward each other. The absence of live music was impossible to ignore. She stood near the edge of the room, watching. The piano sat there, silent, almost patient. Her heart began to race, slow and heavy. She wasn't afraid of playing. She was afraid of what playing meant. Once she sat down, there would be no pretending anymore. No hiding behind uniforms or quiet work. She thought of the years she spent invisible after walking away, how she had learned to be small to survive. The manager noticed the growing unease in the room. He wiped his forehead and scanned the hall. His eyes landed on her for a moment. Something like doubt crossed his face. Then it hardened into pride. He turned away. A guest stood and asked politely when the performance would begin. The manager gave a practiced answer about minor delays. The guest nodded, unconvinced. The co-worker returned to her side. If you wanted to, they said quietly, now would be the time. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. She wasn't doing this to prove anything. Not to the manager. Not to the guests. She was doing it because the music was already awake inside her, and keeping it silent hurt more than letting it speak. She took a slow breath and stepped forward. The movement caught attention. A few people turned. Whispers followed. The manager noticed her walking toward the piano and froze. What are you doing? He hissed. She stopped a few steps away and looked at him calmly. The guests are waiting. His face flushed. I made myself clear. So did the silence, she replied gently. The room grew quiet as more people noticed the exchange. Phones lowered. Conversation stopped. The manager glanced around, feeling the pressure of watching eyes. He laughed sharply. Go ahead, he said. Let everyone see why this is a bad idea. She nodded once. Each step toward the piano felt heavy. like walking through deep water. Memories pressed against her, but she didn't push them away. She let them be. She sat. The bench felt familiar beneath her, even after all these years. She rested her hands in her lap for a moment, grounding herself. The room held its breath. She lifted her hands and placed her fingers on the keys. The first note was soft, not loud, not dramatic, just honest. Then another. The sound filled the room, warm and steady. Conversation stopped completely. Heads turned fully toward her. She played slowly at first, letting the piano speak, letting herself remember how to listen. The music wasn't rushed. It wasn't showy. It was real. As she continued, something shifted. The tension in the room eased. Guests leaned back in their seats. Some closed their eyes. Others sat still, caught by the feeling they couldn't explain. The manager stood frozen, his confidence draining with every passing note. Her fingers moved with quiet strength, guided by years she thought she had left behind. The music carried pieces of her story: joy, loss, silence, healing. It wasn't perfect. It was alive. She forgot where she was. She forgot who was watching. For the first time in a long time, she played not for approval, not for praise, but because she needed to. When the final note faded, the silence returned, thicker than before. Then the room erupted. Applause rose from every direction, strong and unfiltered. People stood without realizing they were doing it. Some wiped their eyes. Others looked at each other in disbelief. She remained seated, hands resting lightly on the keys, breathing slowly. The manager stared at her, his mouth slightly open, the weight of his words from the night before settling heavily on his shoulders. She stood and stepped away from the piano, making space for the sound that filled the room. She didn't smile. She didn't bow. She simply walked back into the crowd, her heart still beating with the echo of music she could no longer deny. The applause did not stop right away. It rolled through the hall in waves, growing louder instead of fading. Some guests clapped above their heads. Others simply stood still, hands together, as if afraid the moment would break if they moved too much. The sound filled the space where silence had lived just minutes before. She felt it all from a distance, as if she were standing outside herself. Her heart was still racing, but her face remained calm. She stepped away from the piano and blended into the side of the room, hoping the attention would move on. It didn't. A few guests leaned toward each other, whispering. One older man near the front frowned slightly, then straightened in his seat. His eyes followed her as she moved. "I know that style," he said quietly to the person beside him. "I've heard it before." Another guest nodded slowly. "So have I." The manager forced a smile and clapped along, though his hands moved stiffly. His mind raced faster than his body. This was not how the evening was supposed to go. This was not part of the plan. He cleared his throat and stepped forward, trying to regain control. "Well," he said loudly, "that was unexpected." A few people turned toward him, but most eyes stayed on her. One guest raised a hand slightly. "May we hear another piece?" they asked. Before the manager could answer, others spoke up. "Yes, please." That was beautiful. She hesitated. This had already gone further than she intended. She had only wanted to fill the silence, nothing more. But the room felt open now, warm. Listening, she looked at the piano again. The manager stepped closer to her, his voice low. "You've made your point," he said sharply. "That's enough." She met his eyes, not with anger, but with quiet certainty. "The guests are asking," she said. He glanced around. Important people were watching, people whose opinions mattered more than his pride. He stepped back. She returned to the piano. This time, she did not rush. She took a breath and let her fingers settle. The second piece was different, deeper, slower. It carried the weight of time and the softness of acceptance. The room leaned into it, fully present. When she finished, the applause returned, even stronger. This time, it brought questions. "Where did you study?" someone asked. "How long have you been playing?" Another voice followed. She stood and shook her head gently. "Thank you," she said. "I'm just filling in tonight." But the truth had already begun to surface. The older man stood up and spoke clearly. "I attended a small concert years ago," he said. "A solo performance that left the room silent, just like this." The playing tonight felt the same. Murmurs spread. The manager's face tightened. The man continued. "That performer disappeared not long after. No announcements. No goodbye. Just gone." All eyes turned to her. She felt a familiar tightening in her chest. The past she had locked away was knocking again. "I don't perform anymore," she said quietly. "But you did," the man replied gently. "And you were extraordinary." The word hung in the air. The manager laughed weakly. I'm sure many people play well, he said. That doesn't mean it does, another guest interrupted. When you know, more voices agreed. Stories surfaced, memories, someone mentioned recordings. Someone else mentioned a cancelled tour long ago. The room slowly pieced together. A truth the manager had refused to see from the beginning. She was not pretending. She had never been ordinary. The manager felt the ground shift beneath him. The words he had spoken days earlier echoed in his mind. Loud, careless, final. If she plays, I'll quit. He swallowed. A representative from the event organizers approached, their expression polite but firm. We weren't aware of her background, they said. Why wasn't this communicated? The manager opened his mouth, then closed it. No answer sounded right. She was hired for another role, he said finally. And yet, the representative replied, she saved the evening. She stood quietly as the conversation moved around her, as if she were not there. This was not what she wanted. She had not played to be exposed. She had played because the silence demanded it. A co-worker touched her arm lightly. Are you okay? They whispered. She nodded. I will be. The event continued, smoother now. Guests were satisfied. The tension had transformed into admiration and curiosity. But the manager stayed distant, watching her with a mix of disbelief and fear. Later, when the hall had thinned and the lights dimmed, he approached her again. You should have told me, he said. She looked at him calmly. You never asked. He had no reply. The weight of the evening settled heavily on him. Authority meant little when truth stood in front of everyone. She gathered her things quietly, ready to leave. As she walked toward the exit, applause followed her again, softer this time, personal. People nodded, smiled, thanked her. She accepted it with grace but did not linger. Outside, the night air felt different, lighter. She breathed deeply, unsure of what tomorrow would bring. Behind her, the building stood silent again. But the silence was no longer empty. It was full of truth. The next morning came with a quiet that felt new. Not empty, not heavy, just calm. She woke earlier than usual, the echo of the piano still moving gently through her thoughts. For the first time in years, she did not feel the urge to push the memories away. They sat with her, steady and honest. When she arrived at work, the building felt different. People greeted her with softer voices, with respect that hadn't been there before. No one stared, but no one ignored her either. It was as if everyone now understood something they hadn't before, even if they couldn't explain it. The manager had not arrived yet. She went about her duties as usual. She did not seek attention. She did not bring up the night before. She wiped tables, ranged chairs, helped guests find their way. But the work no longer felt like hiding. It felt like choosing. Later in the morning, a meeting was called. Staff gathered quietly. The manager stood at the front, his posture stiff. His voice lacked its usual sharpness. He spoke carefully. Last night showed us something important, he said. Assumptions can be costly. No one interrupted. He cleared his throat. I made a statement I should not have made. I let pride speak before respect. The room stayed silent. I will be stepping down, he said finally. Effective immediately. A few people inhaled sharply. Others simply nodded, as if they had seen this coming. He turned his gaze toward her. I was wrong, he said. About you. About a lot of things. She met his eyes, not with triumph, but with calm understanding. I hope you find what you're looking for, she replied. There was no anger in her voice. No need for it. He left shortly after, his footsteps fading down the hall. The building exhaled. Later that day, representatives from the organization approached her privately. They spoke kindly, respectfully. They acknowledged her past without pushing her to relive it. We would like to offer you a choice. One of them said, if you wish to perform again, the door is open. If not, we understand. She listened without interrupting. For now, she said, I need time. They nodded, honoring that answer. That evening, she walked home slowly. The city lights glowed softly around her. She thought about the years she had spent running from music, not because she hated it, but because she had loved it too deeply and been hurt by what came with it. She realized something important. She had never lost music. She had only lost herself inside it. At home, she sat at the small table by the window. Her hands rested in front of her, relaxed. For the first time, they didn't feel heavy. They felt ready. Days passed. She returned to work, steady and grounded. Sometimes guests asked if she would play again. Sometimes they didn't. Either way, she felt whole. One quiet afternoon, when the hall was empty and the light was low, she walked toward the piano. No one asked her to. She sat down and played a few notes, just for herself. The sound filled the space gently, without pressure, without expectation. She smiled, small and real. Music was no longer a place of pain. It was home. She understood now that true respect does not come from titles or loud voices. It comes from listening, from humility, from knowing that greatness often walks quietly, waiting for the right moment to be seen. And when that moment arrives, it doesn't shout. It plays. The end.